exciting episode of Malden Talks. Tonight's guest, this late in May, is a neighborhood friend of ours, Nekita Lamour. Nekita's got some interesting topics that we're going to chat about tonight. We're going to talk about outreach to minority communities. We're going to cover some topics, and Nekita's going to introduce herself and then educate me about linguistic, ethnic, and immigrants. So Nekita, could you explain some of this to us? What are we chatting about tonight?
Okay, let me say again. My name is Nekita Lamour. I've been in Malden for the past 20 years, and I'm glad that you have invited me to come and talk about several topics. And one of them is a concern of mine, a concern to outreach to minority communities. So what I mean by minority communities, so we have linguistic minorities, and you can tell from my language. So what do we say? I don't know, 70 languages, 100, but I don't know. But I think Malden praises itself as a city who speaks numerous languages, so I forgot how many. And then we have ethnic minorities, people who come from different countries, and people who come from different ethnic groups. We have Asians, we have blacks, we have Africans, so we have different ethnic groups in the city. And we also have immigrants, so we have long-time immigrants like myself, like I refer to as established immigrants. And we also have recent immigrants, people who come every day. I think we see that in the schools. I'm a teacher, and you see that in the schools, and people will come every day.
What kind of outreach are we talking about?
I mean communication with those people, because they come from another culture, another country. So we have to teach them, help them adapt to Malden, help them adapt to the country. I think several cities have them. So I look at like the big cities, for instance, like Boston has a no Bostonian. I think he had changed, the name was changed, but it has a no Bostonian office to immigrants. So there is, you can tell from the departments or the offices that they have, there's a special attention to the immigrant community.
And some of this outreach
I'm talking about Boston, yes.
Would be composed of special education?
Well,
education should be a component of this, right?
Within, now that's the city hall. What I'm saying in Boston, within the education, the Boston public schools, so they do have, I was just in a meeting, they have a refugee and immigrant department. So you do see ELL, English language learner. They have a department for English language learner. So that's within the schools. So yeah, they do have departments that their emphasis is on the immigrant community in Boston. So I don't see that in Malden. So it's like it looks like the whole city is it's a European students, but it's not.
That sort of brings us up to something you talk about concerning role models. Could you describe how we want to deal with that? Okay,
so I believe like the students need teachers or staff they can see themselves in, they can relate to. So usually, from the black community, so we come from like a village, a village culture. I think with others who are not from our culture, it's difficult to relate to the person. So relationship is very important when it comes to teaching. When it comes to living as a black person, so you need to have relationships. So I think a human being, you don't live in isolation. And also, if you study the history of teaching, the history of education in this country, it used to be, somebody, that's the way it is. It's somebody who lives in the community. It's somebody who grew up in the community, and then they go to a state college, they go to Boston State, they go to Salem State, and then they come back, they still live in the community, and then they come back and teach. So that's the tradition. But they still go to Salem State, but now they don't live in the city anymore. So they've moved to the suburbs.
Yes, that's from the teacher's side and the student's side. But what about parents? How do we get the parents involved?
You have to speak their language, and also they don't use, a lot of those parents, they don't use the internet. So we send things online, we send things in writings. So they don't use the internet. So we have to teach them how to use the internet, or we call them. I used to have 125 parents when I was teaching. I used to bring 125 parents to meetings. Then it started on Saturday, it started on Friday nights, I mean on weeknights. So do it on the weekend nights, like on Saturday afternoon, on Sunday afternoon. So you do the meetings in where they are, you know, you go where they are. So we used to have those meetings, the parent trainings in the churches, in the schools. So bring them after church. You know, that's the way you used to get the community.
That's what you mean when you talk about the learning environment.
Okay.
Going to the environment where the parents are, so you can reach them.
Yes.
And incorporating the environment for the children with the role models.
Yes.
So that they can learn better.
And then also what I mean by learning environment. So in the Black communities, we tend not to do school, not to teach, not to have learning programs. Like I look at other cultures. You know, we live in a very diverse city. So not to use diverse for the sake of using the terms, but when you look at other ethnic groups, so you see what they do. So they do have schools in the mosques. They do have schools in the community centers. So the Black communities, we don't do that. So we need to have schools in the churches. So where we teach our way, you know, where we teach the way some of the old countries, it still works. You know, some of the aspects, some of the ways we were taught in the Caribbean, some of the things we were taught in the Caribbean, it's still applicable today. So we're not, you know, we don't throw away the old, so we adapt. So we keep what is new, we keep what is good from the Caribbean, from Africa, we keep it. And we adapt, we bring what the European brought us. So in other words, we have to have a mixture of, you know, of the Euro culture, of the different style, of the, you know, the nuns, you know, I mean, I like them, you know, they have their issues, but, you know, the character that the nuns created in you. So we don't do in the character education in the schools, you know. So the personality, I think the nuns, you know, they did a good job. So we can bring that up too. We can be, you know, our grandmothers, you know. We have to bring some of those aspects in the culture.
I remember a lot of things I learned from my maternal grandmother, who lived in her house in Dominica. And then when we were older and we brought her to the States and she lived with us in Jamaica Plain. That's invaluable. You're right. Yes, you're right. Yes. I lived it, I experienced it, so I can picture what you're saying. But now, let's get to something a little more specific. Could you enlighten us what's going on in the Faulkner neighborhood with your fellow residents? What's going on there?
Okay, so what I'm saying is that the residents are not, you know, really involved. So since I came here, and the neighborhood had come a long way. When I came here, you know, the tracks, you know, the tracks were there. So it was really, you know, ugly, you know. But they've done a good job.
With
the bike path
and beautification.
So the bike path, you know, is very nice. But the residents in that bike path area, they are not involved in shaping the bike path. As a matter of fact, even when they clean it, like the place is closer, the area is closer to the streets, to the houses, they don't clean it up. Like in the snow, during the snow, they will clean up the bike path, but the streets by the bike path are not cleaned. So it seems that, you know, as a resident in the bike path neighborhood, you know, we are excluded from taking part in the maintenance of the bike path. So we were not there. I was part of one of the groups, but somehow I felt, you know, left out. You know, I didn't feel like I was part of it.
So it seems like two sides of a problem. Your neighbors don't engage, but then the city doesn't reach out to them. So both sides aren't reaching out to each other. Is that what you're?
Yeah. So anyway. So I study. I talk with elders. You know, we talk about elders like a grandmother. So I do speak with elders. So that neighborhood has a tradition, has a history of not being engaged. So maybe it's the low-income neighborhood, even when it was all white, so it's not, people are not involved. So they told me the last time it was a very engaging neighborhood was when Herbert Jackson was the mayor, I mean not the mayor, the councillor of that neighborhood. So he lived on Salem Street. I've spoken with his wife. He lived on I think he died in 1978. So he was like one of the first black person to be at the State House. I don't know if you've read about Herbert Jackson. So he was a councillor at that time. But elders were the 80s, 90s. Some of them have died. So they've told me this year you have not received any attention. That's why I went. I went for our office to give you some attention.
Can I ask you a tough question?
Mm-hmm.
Besides you, who else in that neighborhood gets involved?
I don't know. I just haven't met them. That's what I have. I did run for office, but it will take a long time, a lot of effort to really get people involved. So sometimes I think we talk about that offline, off camera. So they need somebody with a title. That's what I'm saying. You know, somebody. My title is professional student. They need somebody with a fancy title. But we have to teach people to develop grassroots leadership. So we don't have to wait for the people with the fancy titles to take care of the neighborhood. So we have to do it ourselves. So I do believe in grassroots, grassroots engagement. So if you're waiting for people with fancy titles or city officials, they'll take care of the more affluent neighborhood. So let me tell you, like the reason why, one of the reasons I talk about neighborhood, I read on the paper, or I read in the paper that 13 streets will be done in the more affluent neighborhood, at the Fellsway, Ward 3. They're gonna do 13 streets. To
redo the streets or the lead pipes?
The pipes. The streets. Once you do the pipes, the streets will have to be done too.
That's right.
Because they kind of dig in to get to the pipes. So the streets will have to be done also. So they're doing 13 in the next 5 years. Whereas Ward 5, like my area, Precinct 1, which is like the least affluent neighborhood, they're only doing 2 streets. But I'm not saying even doing it because they are finishing. Because I know it's Grenville Ave is right in front of my street. So they are finishing, they are completing Grenville Ave, only 2. In other words, they're doing 2 Grenville Ave, which is the longer street, and Grenville Place. The place is like a shorter, shorter street. So, but they've started. If you walk up there, they've started it. They're only going to finish it. So that area, that's one way you can tell it gets a lot less attention. It should have more or as much attention as the other ones. So we have the pipes that were built installed in 1890s, 1894, 1894, 18 whatever. So in the 1890s, so those pipes need to be removed. So they have lead, they have all the water issues that people have read in the paper. I think once they had everybody tested their water, so they had to do that, and there's bacteria in the summertime. The bacteria accumulate, so you have more bacteria in the summertime, so it gets hot, and also very dangerous fire. Like the water pressure is very low. Low water pressure. There was a fire, in my street. It took 45 minutes for the fire to start, not to begin extinguish the fire. So as I wrote that, luckily it wasn't windy, so the fire was just contained. Some houses next door, they had some, the siding was damaged. But if it was a windy day, I wouldn't be there. My house would have, it would have been an inferno if it was a windy day. But luckily,
those are issues that need to be addressed.
Luckily it wasn't windy, so the fire just stayed there. So it's a serious issue. So why? And I've been asking them. They told me that. I was told my area, that the cross street area, is not in the horizon to be done. So they're not going to do it unless that the citizens do something. They're not going to do it.
Okay. Well, we're gonna wrap up this episode now. It's been great. A lot of people don't know these issues that we've been talking about tonight, so we're going to publish this and we're going to let people know. If you want to give any final closing remarks, if you want to say something, now's the time.
Okay, I want to say thank you for watching. Thank you, Joe, for bringing me here. And I really enjoyed talking. So this is just the beginning, and I hope it's not the first time, the only time. So I thought we were going to talk about one issue, but it seemed that we've talked about the minorities, the outreach to minorities, and the role model in education, parental involvement, learning environment, to have learning environment. By this I mean for parents, for the community, stakeholders, to start doing educational programs, in their own milieu, if I may. And as a resident, I'm concerned about the neighborhood. We need more neighborhood engagement in the Faulkner area. So thank you all for watching.
Thank you all. Good night. It's been a pleasure. There's going to be plenty more topics and plenty more shows in the future. Good night.